Today, we sanded our texture. I primed and painted the house. After that, I put in all of our outlets and our bathroom GFI. There was really nothing much to relearn. Just making sure that you have all of your boogers and your texture looks really clean before you paint, because if not, it'll all pop out. One mistake, or not really a mistake, but a learning experience is I left the plastic on while my paint was drying. So all of the paint that got on our plastic cover in our windows kind of pulled together and it dripped down on the bottom of our windowsill. So I just had to take a wet sponge and clean it off. So after you paint, I'd wait about 10 or 15 minutes and then I'd peel that plastic off just so it doesn't start dripping on your sill. One tip would be using your drill with a Phillips head instead of hand screwing in all of your outlets. That saves a lot of time and it helps your wrist. You don't tire out as much. Today we're going to need our pole sander to sand down all of our texture before we paint. We're going to need a drill and our paint paddle to mix all of our paint. Once we're done painting and it's all dry and we have our tape off, we're going to need our electric tools to start wiring our outlets, and I used a drill with a Phillips head to screw them in to our electric boxes. Right now we're just taping our windows. Jasper's doing that while I'm going around caulking all the corners. It's important to caulk your corners because when you go to paint, if you didn't have caulk behind it, that paint would eventually start to peel and you'd have to come back and caulk it like 2 or 3 weeks later. So we're just caulking the corners right now. It gives it a nice look, so it's not too sharp of a corner, and it also gives something for the paint to adhere to, so it won't just bear the weight and the stress of the house shifting. No, it's just one bead. Wipe it. Get a wet sponge, wet your finger a little bit, and wipe it. Nothing too big, just enough to cover any imperfections in that corner. Well, I just had to bring our paint machine out here. Someone has to clean it because when it got turned off the last time, someone didn't run water through it and clean out all the paint. So there's dried paint in there, so we're unable to use that to spray because it's so clogged up. We were unable to shoot that dry paint out. Yeah, we're going to lose about 10 minutes because this was all set up, ready to go. So now we have to go find another machine and do the same thing. I
am scraping the floor while Isaiah is getting ready to paint. It's important to clean the floor so that when you lay your floor, you don't have big chunks getting in the way. It makes it so your floor doesn't sit down flat. When you put down your flooring, you don't want the clumps because they'll push up and make your flooring pop up. It won't lay flat. It can prevent it from connecting together how it's supposed
to. So we got it all cleaned out, all primed. You have a bucket of clean water. You have your paint, and you don't really need a third bucket, but I like it. So you're going to start with your fat tube because that's your inlet, and the skinny tube, that's your return. So when you go to prime it, what you're going to do is you're going to put your fat tube in the primer and your skinny tube in the water, and you'll turn it on, and you'll see all the paint start to gush out. And once paint starts to gush out, then you know paint's all the way through the machine. Then you can throw it back in there, and then you can grab your spray gun and start spraying the side of this bucket or this bucket. And then once you see all the water start to come out and you have a thick like syrupy paint line, then you know you're fully primed and good to go. And once that happens, you can turn up your pressure from start all the way to about right there, and then you're good to start spraying. You want to take care of your spray guns, especially with these, because if you don't clean them out properly, then someone who needs to use it next is going to have to take time, take it apart, and clean all of that dried paint out. So right now we're about halfway done painting our house. We got done with our primer. Took about 45 minutes for it to dry. Depending on the day, it might take 30, 45 minutes. You don't need it all the way dry. You just need it dry to the touch. After that, we're just going to go ahead and shoot our paint up. Same thing, let it dry for about 45 minutes, an hour. Once that's all dry, we have our floor scraped, ready to floor. So once it's dry, we're going to start putting our flooring in. So our paint's all dry now. We're just taking off our tape before it gets too dry, because if it gets too dry, we'll end up peeling the paint off with it. But this is my favorite part, because to me it's super satisfying hearing it and watching all the dirty plastic come off. Right now, I'm working on my last outlet. I wired all of them, including the kitchen GFI. So what I like to do is, when I start out, I'll unravel the wires because the box is made up, and I separate my hots on the right side and my neutral and my ground on the left side, just because that's the way they are on our outlet. Our hots go with the gold, our green is our ground, and our silver goes with our neutral. So I just like to start separating them out. Then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the wire and strip it back about an inch, maybe an inch and a half. Then the next thing I'm going to do is we need to loop our wires so we can hook them around our screws, but our loop has to be going clockwise with our nut, or our screw. So I'm going to take this end of our wire cutters, and I'm just going to pinch the end of our wire, and I'm just going to loop it up like that, so they'll all look like this. And I'm going to go up with the hots, because of the way we're going to screw. It's going to screw that way, and our loop is going to go into the direction our screw is going. And with our neutrals and our ground, I'm going to loop them downwards so they can also follow the direction of our screw's path when we go to tighten them. Are we going? Rolling? Okay. Then you just hook the copper around the screw like that, and I take the same part of my wire cutters, and I like to just pinch it tight around the screw, and then kind of tighten that up. Same thing with this one. I'm going to turn it sideways. Same thing with our neutrals and our ground. You just have to make sure, it's easy to get mixed up. You have to make sure that your wire's going in the same direction as your screw.
Last one.
Yeah, last one. Sometimes if you coil them too tight, it can be hard to get on, so you just have to open it up a little bit. Just like that. straighten it back out. This, I like to kind of hug my wires together because it's easier to push it in, and the longer you leave your wires, the harder it's going to be to push it in. But the shorter you cut your wires, the harder it's going to be to connect it to your outlet. So you kind of have to pick what you want. So I like to do a medium, and you just kind of fold it back into that box and start off with getting one screw in. Come back down on the bottom screw. Get that one started. Now we're in, and you can see there's a little bit of wiggle, so as you screw in, you can straighten it out. Well, there's nothing wrong with using a screwdriver. It's just, for me, it takes a little bit more time because there's a bunch of threads on these screws, and you'd have to back it out and screw it in for every wire you connect. So for me, it's a lot quicker to just tighten them with a drill, and it doesn't tire your wrist out. At first I had an impact, but an impact was a little bit too powerful. So I switched to a drill because you're able to control the speed it rotates at if you want it softer or faster. And with an impact, it's just one speed. And I dropped it down to the first gear here just for a little bit more control. Because if it was on the second one, it just spins a little bit more aggressively. So that it saved a lot of time, and it saved a lot of strain on my wrist.
Well, today they came in and they did their caulking in their corners. So we caulk all our inside corners from the ceiling to the wall, and wall-to-wall connections as far as in the corners. So they caulked all those first, and then they came in and sprayed a coat of PBA primer, which is a sheetrock sealer, and that just lets the paint not soak into the drywall as much, and the primer just keeps a better finish on your paint finish when you're done. Texture looks good. They've got a few minor glips here and there, but otherwise everything looks good. We use an eggshell finish on everything, ceiling and walls. And then they came in and they're starting to wire. They were bored, so they decided to come in and start wiring their outlets in. And tomorrow they'll finish up with all their switches. And then they'll probably get started in the bathroom and start their red guard for their shower so they can start setting tile. But they're ready to start trimming doors. We got to trim around the door here. It'll get door casing and a little 3/4 inch return to the frame. We call that a jam extension. It extends out. And then they'll do a piece of trim on that. And next, after the tile in the bathroom, they'll set vanities, countertops, and start running flooring. But today they did a good job. The paint looks good. Real happy with their progress, and excited to see them get started on the shower tile.